Chapter 9. Tom found it hard to believe he was finally here, even after all the hours on the train, watching desert give way to greener pastures and ultimately into civilization. He'd never seen so many people at once, he thought, as he alighted at the main terminus in Adelaide. On the concourse he passed various refreshment rooms, including a grand dining room, and even a hairdresser was doing a good trade with the travellers from far and wide. The hall was lined with a marble all so highly polished that he could see his own reflection staring back, and he soon learned not to stop suddenly in court because it frustrated others in a hurry to get to wherever they were going. Stepping to the side for a moment to look up to the ceiling, Tom noted that a vast dome helped to create a lofty, dignified space in which travellers could sit on the concourse and wait for their connections to be announced. He was thrilled to experience the new Art Deco building, which was fashioned in the neoclassical style and now served as the Central City Railway station, its administration layered in the levels above. When he finally reached the street, he couldn't help but turn back to regard the sandstone edifice that cast a pinkish glow in the afternoon sun looming over several stories. The station's clock on the main facade told him it was nearing 3. His intention was to travel down to the port to see about some casual work, but excited by being in the state capital, he made the decision to walk around the city and acquaint himself with its layout. That exploration took him down to the River Torrens for a while before he strolled through the Botanic Gardens and came back onto North Terrace, one of the 4 main arteries encircling what was known as the Square Mile. He had read that this was the grandest and ran east to west along the northern edge of the city, where many of the capital's cultural institutions were based. It was elegant, leafy, and he was contentedly taking in the scenery as he walked along the pleasantly wide streets, not focused on anything specific until his attention was caught by a modest sign painted on the glass above the front door of a terrace house. Tiller and Associates. Tom blinked. It felt to him as though all motion stopped in that moment, when it was him who had halted. A man who nearly bumped into him gave a sound of disgust and looked back over his shoulder with a vexed expression, but Tom didn't respond because all of his focus was riveted on the door and the memories that it prompted. How many times had his mother made him repeat the name Tillett and Associates? How could he have forgotten? He could only blame the grief and the strange time of isolation and confusion that had followed. Should anything ever happen to me, Tom, you have to go and see a firm solicitor called Tillett and Associates. Tom, if I die suddenly, you'll get yourself to Adelaide somehow and visit Tillett and Associates. What's the name of the firm? I want you never to forget. He duly repeated the name, sounding almost bored, never believing anything would happen to his mother that would force him to go in search of these people in Adelaide. It was only now that he recalled his mother murmuring to him about Tillett and Associates while he raced against time over the desert to get her and his soon-to-be sister to Farina. She said it so many times as he had driven Bonnie faster than she cared to go while he grimly set his sights on the Bush Hospital. Tillett Associates, Tom, don't forget, she panted. His eyes watered at the memory as he realized that perhaps his mother had begun to believe that she might not see another day, and she hadn't. He swallowed, returned to the present, and became aware of more people flowing around him as he stood staring in the middle of the pavement. He straightened himself, breathed in, and knew that he would need to confront the firm of Tillett and Associates to see what secrets lay behind the black door, but not today. It was getting on towards late afternoon to be turned, so he turned away and wended a path through to the famous Hindley Street on his way back towards the station. He'd actually heard of it for its debauchery of pre-war times, but he wasn't observing much of anything too racy. Instead, he gathered that the street likely lit up the city of an evening with colourful blinking lights and sound of excited audience attending the theatres. As he reached the station where he'd begun the afternoon, it was approaching sunset, and the people moving around now were the theatre goers and early diners. Given the pleasant evening, there were also plenty of strollers taking a walk near the river. He stood in the wide boulevard overlooking North Terrace. A new decision had to be made quickly. Either he found accommodation in the city, which would be expensive, or he would make his way down to the port before dark and find a guest house or hotel room over a pub. Once night closed in, everything would seem more strange, more difficult. However, the smell of cooked pastry wafted over, making his belly rumble. He not eaten anything at midday, saving his money and relying on breakfast to carry him through to an evening meal. And right now the irresistible fragrance of meat pie was calling to him. He followed the scent to where people were queuing at a kiosk with a canvas awning. 2 men in white baker's hat were serving a dish he overheard people ordering, called a pie floater. It seemed to have appealed to all, from workers ending a busy day to the theatre-goers in their finery, as he watched them experience what looked to be a guilty treat, laughing and dabbing at their mouths with paper serviettes. Craning to see the dish, he spotted a thick slurry of mashed peas, halfway to a soup as far as he was concerned, and that a square pie placed lid down to float in the pond of vivid green, odd but irresistible. Well, there was nothing for it, he decided, but to join the herd. He gathered from the walk around him that the van would be twice as busy once the drinkers poured out the pubs, so within a few minutes he was one of the smiling people standing around and eating, chatting with his fellow diners. "You first, really?" one man said, sounding astonished. Tom grinned. "I come from the outback up north. No pie floaters there, although I think my father once mentioned that his folks used to have a pea and pie supper in England, where they came from. Maybe it was this." The man nodded. "Could be right, although visitors from the other states turn their noses up. They just don't get it." He grinned, dragging a spoon around, the last of a thick roll of peas. "His choice is good after a skinful," he continued. "Is that right?" "Oh, my word. It's as though you're enjoying the final meal of your life, you'll see." "So what's the fella from London Farm not doing here? Looking for work, are you?" "Yes, I thought I'd head to the port and ask around. Not an easy time for anyone to find work," the fellow said, apologizing with a shrug for stating the obvious. Tom nodded his understanding. "But you're on the money. The port is probably the best place. Have you heard about the Black Diamond?" Tom shook his head. His companion smiled. "It's at the intersection of Commercial Road and St. Vincent Street. Busy spot overlooked by a silent cop." Tom didn't know what that meant, but he nodded all the same, encouraging the man to continue. "Black Diamond refers to coal, of course, but it's that corner where men gather and find out what work is going at the port. In days gone, the lucky ones would be given a piece of coal as their pass to get work, hence the nickname. Anyway, head there. You're young, strong, fit. You should be able to find some manual work." He pointed down North Terrace. "Follow the road, but it's a long way. I'll recommend you take the train." "Have you sorted your accommodation?" "Not yet." "What about a tram?" Tom asked, preferring to watch the street life go by rather than rattling on a track that would likely snake around Adelaide's hustle and bustle. "No trams here. Take a motor bus from over there by the Gresham Hotel." The man pointed to the opposite side of the great terrace, backed up towards the intersection of King William Street. "I think you'll have to change, but ask the conductor. Go down to Appleton, find rooms, and it's a short walk to Black Diamond Corner." "That's perfect. There," the man pointed. "A motor bus like this one. You better ask which number or you'll be off to Lars Bay," he warned with a grin. Tom scooped up his final mouthful and then bent down to pick up the small bag that he slung over his shoulder. "Cheers, mate." "Good luck," the man said, giving a casual salute of farewell, and they parted ways. Tom returned his plate to the servery and gave them a thumbs up in thanks. Wiping his mouth with a handkerchief his mother had drummed into him to always carry, he skipped across the wide road, dodging trams, buses, cars, and the horses and carts that made up the cacophony of traffic. Since his arrival, Tom had successfully blocked out the noise, mostly due to his wonder. But now, with a full belly and fatigue beginning to niggle, he suddenly felt the full weight of Adelaide's city life starting to overwhelm him. What had been a novelty earlier in the day, even exciting, suddenly made him feel lonelier than he'd ever felt in the grey outback, when little more than an hour's mournful screech pierced the night. The constant motion and the claustrophobic presence of so many people and vehicles, as well as air that felt thick and clogged with fumes, was oppressive. As he made his way through the tram stop across the road, he could almost chew on the dust and grit of the city, which was so different to the earthly taste of the sand in the wilderness. He had been warned by several people to expect a reaction to the commotion. While he could hardly have prepared himself, he also knew not to feel besieged and began to school his thoughts into a soothing focus. One foot in front of the other, find the bus, pay for your ticket, and find a quiet seat at the back. Calm. Tom leaned towards a couple of young men joshing each other near the queue. Hey, Mayor, which bus goes down Port Road? Simple, just look for the bus that says Port Adelaide on its front. Tom felt stupid for asking, but nodded his thanks and started scrutinising the buses turning the corner. Finally, one had a sign for Port Adelaide. Others, looking out for the same bus, picked up bags or straightened their coats, shuffling forward a few steps in anticipation as more people than Tom expected alighted in this vehicle. It's the double-deck Garford, one woman said, rather obviously, but some sounding relieved. Another gave her a gentle shove. Let's hurry for a seat downstairs, then you won't get your vertigo. Despite this cold, Tom decided he would climb the curling steps to the upper deck to enjoy the city mostly to himself. Only a couple of hardy smokers sat up here, faces burrowing into scarves, and he found a seat tucked into the corner. He pushed his bag between his feet, checked his money was still in the breast pocket, and let out a quiet sigh, relieved to be heading at last towards the accommodation and a bed. The bus lurched, stopped, lurched forward again, and finally got going. Tom picked up a strange new waft of metal mixing with perfume and the aroma of burning tobacco, along with the scent of baked pastry and the stewed meat that hadn't left him yet. He imagined he must look like a wide-eyed child at a fun fair, bamboozled and awed by all the new sounds and colours and smells. The conductor ambled up. His uniform was wafty with caked dust. He saw Tom staring. You wouldn't think I brushed it before each shift, would you? Tom shook his head, offering a sixpence. I need to get to Alberton. So, mate, to get there, I'm going to give you 2 tickets. One for the first part of the journey, which will take you to Albert Park. You'll get there and transfer to a tram, probably a bouncing Billy if you're lucky. He said it with a wink, though you may not be quite so lucky to do so. And then you can show your conductor the second one, all right? It's not far, a few minutes. You shouldn't be waiting long. Tom nodded, inwardly sighing that his journey to a pillar stool had 2 stages. The conductor continued. On a wintry night in a high wind, I end up looking like this at the end of the shift, he said, handing Tom an oblong ticket the colour of furiously blushing skin. That tuppence has penny and your change. He dropped 2 pennies and a half penny into Tom's palm. Out of towner? That's obvious. It is. Where you actually headed? Tom gave a soft sigh. Tomorrow I'm planning to get to Black Diamond Corner for work at the port, but I need to find accommodation for tonight. The conductor nodded. Though there's some guest houses around Albert Park, but I agree, Alberton probably is a good bet. Remember, the conductor needed to cite this one, alright? Point out the second ticket. The Alberton Hotel is probably your best chance. Righto, thanks. Friday night are always busy like this, the man quipped. You're doing the right thing by escaping. There's a big match tomorrow down there. I presume you're a Magpies fan. Of course, Tom replied. No, it was the right response. The fellow winked again. As it turned out, the journey was enjoyable once they cleared the stop-start nature of the city and they hit open fields. The bus veered to the right, and Tom gathered they were finally heading in the direction of the port. He alighted at the nod of the conductor, who also helpfully announced the Albert Park terminus, and was gratified as the man pointed towards a tram about to arrive. That's your ride to Alberton, mate. Thanks, Tom said, and grinned to himself, noting how the tram, as it stopped, did seem to rock at each end. Bouncing Billy, now he understands. Tom showed the tram conductor his second ticket and found a seat at the back, suddenly wishing he hadn't devoured his photo quite so greedily as the tram began its near drunken stop bounce down towards his destination. As a wool classer from Farina finished his first taste of a pie floater in North Terrace, Fleur and Henry were standing outside their funeral home, facing Commercial Street, which led down towards the port. Henry was from going to the pub this evening, but his sour mood seemed to be easing as he smoked and relaxed, watching dust settle across the port region of Adelaide as workers headed home. Most via one of the pubs, trams rumbled by, and the distant sound of the dock workers began to fade as they finished up for the day. A man hurried by, headed towards the bus that was lingering at the bus stop nearby. "Mr. Appleby, Miss Appleby," he said, touching his flat cap. "Good day, Thomas," Henry said, and the man flicked a glance back with a grin. "Thomas William was always nice to me at school," Fleur commented. "Others not so, from memory." "That's because you took a lofty approach to school, Fleur. I'm different now, Dad, aren't I?" She hoped she'd confirm that she was. "My word, yes. As much as we admire your self-assurance, your mother and I used to worry whether your confidence would isolate you, that your somewhat dismissive attitudes at times." Fleur laughed. "It did, Dad. I didn't know how to control it then, but I'm better at it now, and I don't believe I'm dismissive." "No, my dear, that was probably the wrong word. You don't suffer fools easily, but you see, fools often present as ordinary people with the kind of questions or outlooks that most share, and people like you who already know the answer or don't necessarily share their views of the world need to find tolerance. I hope I have. Well, you're certainly much better at disguising your disdain when it erupts." He gave her an affectionate smile. "Rare these days." "It's not a criticism, but just an observation. We all have our prickly bits. I wish you could be more patient with Irma, for instance." "I wish I could too," Fleur answered, remaining neutral. "I would have an easier, less irritated life and wife if you were." "Do you love her, Dad?" "I'm sorry to repeat the query." He looked at her in a soft pain. "I never thought about it," he said, looking embarrassed, and she knew that was an admission of truth. "But you loved my mother, I know it." "That I did, but there was only one May Appleby, and I accepted that a long time ago." He took off his recollection. "Do you know why this road is so wide, Fleur?" He took his old winter watch, a wedding gift from May, and flicked open the lid to reveal the large white porcelain face behind its glass. "Getting late," he murmured. So she did know why the road was so wide. He told her this a couple of times previously. "Was her father getting old or suffering dementia? Tell me," she said, not wishing to tarnish the pleasant merriments or bring the conversation to an end. "The plan was to make this a canal. Can you believe that?" He glanced away, and she could see his face was filled with animated pleasure. "He'll surely live in his memory." So they dug out this wide channel, the idea being that all the goods going to and from the port could be barged into and out of the city. A masterstroke. "But it didn't happen," Fleur said gently. He shook his head. "Big plans, too big probably. But it's still brilliant, Dad. All these shops do well, and the new trolleys buses are coming." "Yes, still. I just love the idea. It might have been a waterway. Such a grand vision." "I have a grand vision," she said, surprised at herself for leaping in so blatantly. "Do you, my girl? You know, I've been wanting to have this conversation, so let's have it now while we're alone." He nodded, looking trapped. "All right, tell me what you're thinking." "I think women are kept out of this industry deliberately." "Not by me," he said, sounded injured. "No, you're nothing short of a trailblazer." Fleur complimented him. "My mother wanted this for us too, didn't she? She always encouraged me to keep my interest in your work, and even though I was adopted, and she used to say I was my father's daughter through and through, showing knowledge far beyond that of any of other Undertaker's son. She was on the money, Fleur. You've been nothing but exemplary in this field, and I truly applaud your commitment studies into the human body and its physiology. Even so, it doesn't matter how qualified or exemplary I am. Your colleagues don't want women in the business, Dad. I don't know what you all discuss at the Freemasons' Hall or in the pub, but they seem to be so suspicious of the notion of women working in the undertaking. Women are too emotional, Fleur." "Really? Have I ever been so emotional as to compromise your position or even a single client?" "I have never lost my calm or wept in the presence of your clients or their loved ones." "No, I can't say you have, but you are rather overly connected to children. You get yourself in a private state over how you want them prepared, and you spend so much extra time on their coffins." "Is that a bad thing?" He shrugged. "You let emotion creep in, but it's not just you we're talking about, is it, my dear? You mean other women. Not everyone has your constitution, and very few would have been raised in the environment that you have or had the exposure. and education, and if we start letting inexperienced women in, there's going to be a lot of world histrionics. She resented his choice of words, but she knew why he might fear such a situation. But that's my point, Dad. More should be exposed to get used to the funeral business. I think women can bring something very special to the industry. Henry made a scoffing sound. They only get the vote in England after the they only got the vote in England after the Great War. She didn't know if he was aiming for levity or really believed it was relevant. But either way, his remark felt patronising, irritated. She continued, "Yes, and they had to be 30 years old and met property qualifications. Very short-sighted, I say, but it's different here. This is not England. We not only gave all women the right to vote a quarter of a century ago, but South Australia was the first place to allow women to be elected to Parliament. You surely can't overlook that." Her question was rhetorical, and she didn't wait for her flustered father to answer, pressing on. "We were the first city to admit women to university on equal terms as men. More than half a century ago, Adelaide elected the first women to an Australian University Council. I won't labour the point, Dad, but if our city and our state can be that forward-thinking, don't you think it can embrace the idea women are doing the funeral business? Or are all your cronies too scared of us?" In that moment, she regretted her final words and looked down. "I didn't mean that. My blood's up, that's all." "Is that how you see me, a crony?" "No, I certainly don't. But maybe the other men in this business, your colleagues, seem to think they own the world of grief and dying, of burials. Stodgy, suited up and looking sombre isn't the only way, Dad. It's likely it was at the turn of the century, but we've fought a war since. We've had Spanish flu rage across nations and a worldwide depression on top of that, which we're only just emerging from. And in all that upheaval, women shouldered a lot of the burden for keeping their nations looking forward. They raised children, found ways to feed them, worked untold hours, and when the men were at war and capable, they did their men's job as well and kept countries safe, fed, productive. Seriously now, don't you think we can arrange funerals and acquit ourselves approximately during them? I would go one step further and say there are instances where I believe women can handle aspects of the undertaking better than men. He narrowed his eyes under the vapour he puffed out from his pipe. He noted once again how grey his pal was. Emma was right. Her father was either desperately ill or dying, and his mind leaking its memories was part of it. Sure. Would you indeed? It seems we've come full circle, Fleur. She knew exactly what his pointed remark was aimed at, but that's my point. No one in our line of work is offering any special handling for women and children who die, or even for those women who are grieving over dead children. Ask any woman, Dad, and learn the truth. Most women would far rather have someone like me preparing her for a final farewell, or that of her mother, sister, aunt, or any child. And I suspect when a child is involved, there's a sense of tenderness that a woman can bring. Men just don't understand. What don't we understand? He sounded wounded. That there's pain, Dad. Probably everlasting. It doesn't matter that a woman can have another child or 10. That's how most men would comfort her. Bear up now. You can always have another. She mimicked. The fact that she lost a single child comes with heartfelt and lifelong regret. You know, there are plenty of men out there who just 10 years ago didn't allow themselves to get caught up in the excitement of a newborn because they weren't sure it would survive its early days or even its early months. Yes, well, they didn't, he replied, sounding frustrated, tapping out the contents of his pipe against the wall. So what? She smiled sympathetically, as if the gesture would help him to grasp her point better. But women do, Dad. If they want a child, the pregnancy is welcomed with joy. Losing that child through the pregnancy or worse, at birth or soon after, is a torture beyond your reckoning, but it's not beyond mine. Even though I've never had a child, I can empathize with a woman's trauma of loss, and it's those women who might welcome more female involvement in preparing their precious loved ones. Can't you see that allowing me into your business is one of your genuine strengths? It's a masterstroke, to be honest. He looked slightly baffled. Most of my peers think I'm mad, letting you work with me. Most of your peers don't have your foresight or so much success attached to the funeral home. Appleby is the gold standard in many ways. I salute you, Dad. as a forward thinker and a modern man, but your colleagues are frightened of women being in this club, in their club, their hotels, their workplace, their industry. She gave a wry smile, and if I'm being honest, they should be, because we're coming. He didn't share her smile. If anything, he looked unbalanced. What do you want from me? It was now or never. Fleur decided. She held up a finger. First, I like to set up a new business separate from our existing one that only cares for children and mothers who pass away during childbirth or soon after. And you call Apple baby, I suppose? Her father's mirthness just fell flat, and it was her turn to frown. Don't make light of it, Dad. He cleared his throat. Why does it need to be separate? Because it does. I plan to give it a new look, no black, white, and pale greys. I want to align it with young and rid us of our Victorian approach to all things funeral. And I'd also like to handle the work slightly differently, albeit I will use women only to tend to women and children under 12. And this is to be yours alone. I prefer it that way, although I would agree to Appleby and daughter. I'm not trying to cut you out. Apple and Bianca, it would have to be, he said. It was a start. She should take the high road, all right, but it must be a new business that is not financially attached to the old. What is your problem with the business that has fed you and raised you, given you such good life, Fleur? It's not the business. You said you're not trying to cut me out, but why are you trying to carve yourself away from all that we've built? He stared at her, and she knew he was demanding a truthful answer. They both already knew, but he needed her to say it. I don't want Irma involved. I don't want her to be in a position to interfere at all in the new venture. And in that admission, she saw his expression and close off. You really do hate her, don't you? He said suddenly. She really didn't want to answer that question, so she dodged it with a shake of her head. I cannot think of her as a mother, Dad, no matter how much you wish it to be. And I know you'll argue that she's been in my life since I was small, but if you're really truthful with yourself, you might need that Irma would have preferred there to be no child existing in the marriage. She was being careful. She didn't tell him about all the times that Irma was hurtful, cruel to her behind his back, to his face. She'd always played stepmother as a fine actress. Irma came into my life at a time when I needed her Fleur. I know, she said, dropping her gaze. She wanted to add some accusation, but she wisely held her tongue, and perhaps she was good for you at that time. You seemed happy enough at first, weren't you? Nothing was further from the truth. She had simply tried to appear happy for his sake, and she continued to lie for his feelings now. I was young, I was in grief. I'll come to you, and Irma seemed kind and affectionate at that stage. She paused, time to lean into some honesty. But then I grew up, Dad, and I realised that while Irma might feel affection for you, there was and still is no fondness for me. I've become a burden for her, which is why there's one more part to my vision, which is I want to leave home, find my own place, live alone, don't be ridiculous for what people say. Why should we care? Because I have a reputation to protect Fleur. That's why. She wanted to ask him how much he valued his reputation as he lurched a slightly weaving path out of the pub most evenings. But all the men who went drinking were the same. Those who caught it for beer after work were just one of the boys. But the hardened drinkers like her father were drowning in visible sorrow in no hurry to return home. They were alcoholics. They just wouldn't admit it. But she didn't want to argue, so she tried to inch him forward with the plans. There's a lovely flat available. I could live above the florist, just a short walk away. No, Fleur, absolutely not. You might be unhappy at home, but it's not Irma's fault, he said. You're a very headstrong young woman, and you want it all your way. So let me live alone and have it my way, she said, feeling suddenly as though her father believed all the fractiousness in the house was her fault. Perhaps it was. That felt like a revelation. Immediately she wanted to tell him about Irma spitting at the photo to accuse him of being absent or witless. When it came to the conniving Irma, she wanted to rage that his wife was trying to heave her out of business and was probably looking forward to the day Henry died, and she could get her hands on the proceeds of his will. But she realized she had no proof. It would sound like a petulant grievance against a woman who managed to give a solid impression. Even Fleur had to admit that, of trying her utmost to be accommodating, supporting, even. Her father's lip had thinned, and she knew she had lost him before He'd even open his mouth to speak again. She wants to see you married with your own family, Fleur. What's so wrong with that? Nothing, Dad, she said in a neutral voice, but she doesn't get to choose who I marry, and right now you're allowing her to choose Jimmy Coughlin. Jimmy, Dad. Even you've started complaining about the quality of their commentary. Can't you see why Irma thinks now is the time? No, Henry said, sounding both perplexed and frustrated at once. Irma thinks the match with James is perfect because he's part of our industry. Dad, you've got blinkers on. All the drink is dulling you. I don't know how Irma does this to you, but somehow she gets you to see only what she does. The Coughlin wants your business. You know they want to move into undertaking, but no one is taking them seriously because of their shadowy past. Blimey, Dad. I think Irma wants to sell your business so she can live off its fat, and probably without you. There, she said. What do you mean without me? She's gloating that you don't have long to live. That was not something Fleur had wanted to slip out, but she couldn't take it back. So she pressed on. Did you plan on mentioning this to me? Your only child that you're dying? Tears were glistening in her eyes now, threatening to run. I don't know what you're talking about, Fleur. Who says I haven't got long to live? He blustered. Irma. And Irma's a doctor, is she? Fleur felt stumped. Perhaps Irma had lied. Why, Fleur couldn't imagine, but she shouldn't be so surprised. It could be anything from wanting to unnerve her stepchild to simply being cruel. Irma was capable of anything, Fleur was sure, and there was no point, she now realized, in pursuing this conversation, because Irma would simply deny it, making Fleur look stupid, forcing her into finger-pointing and accusations. Well, she wouldn't fall into Irma's trap. She needed to be smarter. No, I must have misunderstood, she answered, realizing about the late response. You must have. I'm not at full health. I grant you, I've been feeling fatigued and not very hungry, but that's just a phase. I'll be fine once someone arrives and I get some warmth on my back. Let me say firmly to you, child, that Irma has no interest in the business, only in a happy life. Oh, Dad, she thought, you are delusional. That woman wants you gone, and that's how she'll achieve her happy life. The chance to start again as a wealthy widow without an annoying stepchild. But she sighed the thought away and managed to keep her tone neutral. Well, let me be clear, I will not marry Jimmy Coughlin, she said, drawing a firm boundary line. All right, Fleur, but the least you can do is attend Irma's dinner, be polite, be convivial, and step out with Colin for an evening. Just go along with it and make her happy. And then I don't have to see her again socially. It was the father's turn to say, fine, I really don't want to be involved, nor do I want you to be, Dad. I don't need anyone involved in my romantic interests. He frowned. You don't have any, do you? Not yet, she shrugged. He needs to be special. Oh, Fleur, her father began in a tone that sounded condescending. She knew he didn't mean it and responded before he could continue. No, Dad. What I meant is that he must be special to me. I must be left alone to recognize what it is about a man that makes me notice him, and it won't necessarily be that his business interest matches ours, or that he's a good catch from a social standing point of view. My mother would have not stood for anything but me choosing to marry someone I love. Love is well and good, Fleur, but you can't sweep that away as an actual loving. Even liking one spouse is a bonus. It's the beginning of everything that contributes to a successful marriage. That's how your mum had it so good and could cope with every obstacle, even not being able to have children of your own. You loved each other. That's how a young woman thinks, Fleur. That's perfectly natural, I'd say, but you don't love Irma, she said, cutting again into his patronizing tone. She lowered her voice. If you did, you'd be with her right now, chuckling about something or chatting together as you used to with Mum. She lifted a shoulder in a soft shrug. You made a pragmatic decision with Irma, Dad, and that was yours to make. But don't insist my life has to go that way too. I'd rather run away and join the circus. I'm not. But you're old enough to be married, old enough to be starting your family, yes. But I'm also old enough to live alone and run my own life. He shook his head empathetically. No, Fleur, you will be married out of this house. I want no tongues wagging and compromising Appleby's. She blinked with aspiration and disappointment that he was so close in his mind, but he continued. I expect you to attend Irma's dinner and speak in a civil manner to James and his parents. What about my business idea? I think on it. When do you I said, I'll consider it. We'll talk about this again another time. She heard the adamant note in his warning and knew to let it be. She had pushed her father as far as he dared. One more thing, Dad. She didn't wait for his mission to continue. Whatever else happened to me, you promised that I will still inherit the pocket watch that my mother gave you. He took it out again and saw his gaze often. As he looked at it, she reached out to touch the glorious intricate pattern on its shiny surface. She could feel the warmth from his body on the gold. Henry nodded. Yes, it should be yours. For my first grandson. Yes, it should be yours for my first grandson. He smiled and she returned it, squeezing his hand, wishing she didn't feel like sobbing right now in the moment of tenderness. Flo noticed a man walking towards them, shrugged deep into his coat, his lapels pulled up almost to his mouth and against the wind that was sweeping up off the sea. She saw a thatch of blonde hair, but no other features as she deliberately turned away, not wanting him to see the motion eyes that the prickly conversation with her father had provoked. The man stopped in front of them. Excuse me, sir. Yes, son, how can I help? I'm looking for the Alban Hotel. I might have walked too far. You have, Henry said, stepping out to the street and pointed. Follow your footsteps back, and I'll suggest you cross the street because it's going to come up on that side in about 10 minutes. Many thanks. Stay warm, Henry said as the stranger departed angrily and crossed to the far side. Fleur turned back, watching the man as he navigated through first a bus and then a horse and cart on the right side of the poor road, waiting as a tram rumbled by, and then he was lost in the shadows of the lower right. She wished again she had the freedom to come and go as she pleased. I'll see you inside, Dad, she said, stepping close and squeezing her father's arm. As she did so, she smelled a faint, stale odour of comfort of him. It was hard to pinpoint, but the most accurate word she could describe was mousy. She made a mental note to check if he was using new chemicals in the mortuary. She also made the hard decision that she could no longer count on her father's support. It was time for her to make a break from Appleby's unfortunate path. It felt like something broke inside herself to realise that this was the only way she might achieve her vision to bring women into the funeral business, but she couldn't let her father see the world in tears. She had lost him anyway, and was when it was time to harden her resolve and face her foe.